Canada, Estonia and Belgium were the first to implement laws on freezing Russian assets and transferring them to Ukraine. The US Congress is still considering a corresponding bill.
We are talking about lifting immunity from the sovereign assets of states that have committed an international crime, let's say a serious violation of international law. In Canada, this has already been implemented into legislation, also in Estonia, and this is being discussed at the draft level in the USA. In this situation, we are talking about the fact that the relevant government authorities receive the right not only to freeze, but also to confiscate the assets of states that are involved in a serious violation of international law.
Meanwhile, the European Union is developing mechanisms how to transfer, if not all the seized funds of the Central Bank of the Federation, then at least the income tax that accumulated during the period while the money was frozen to EU.
Western sanctions have frozen $300 billion belonging to the Russian Central Bank. Most of these funds, 180 billion euros, are held at Euroclear, the world's largest securities depository, headquarters in Brussels. Euroclear recently said it had earned around 3 billion euros from frozen Russian assets in the first 9 months of this year alone, up to 347 million euros in the same period in 2022. A rise was driven by rising interest rates, from a message on the website of the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine.
If the situation with the transfer of frozen accounts of sanctioned Russian oligarchs is more complicated and Western countries' private property is inviolable, then the seized assets of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation will most likely go towards the restoration of Ukraine. It is difficult to talk about the timing of the transfer of money, say both experts and the governments of the countries that have frozen the assets of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation. This practice has not been used before. Now, without exaggeration, all of Ukraine's partners are working on developing such a mechanism.
This could be a transfer either to Ukraine or to an international fund. I would like to remind you that it is planned to create an international compensation mechanism, which should consist of 3 components: a register, a compensation commission and a compensation fund. This is at the international level within the Council of Europe, and so the issue of transfer of assets is being decided, whether the money will be sent to Ukraine or to the compensation fund.
Ukraine has a legal basis for receiving compensation from Russia for the damage caused. The UN General Assembly adopted a corresponding resolution back in mid-November 2022. Now the question is whether each country will decide on the transfer of assets at the level of its own legislation, or whether the states will sign an international agreement that will facilitate the process. The ways of transferring money to Ukraine are also unknown.
We have done, are doing and will do our best. Russian assets are now frozen in Switzerland. There are 2 types of assets. The first is those owned by individuals or sanctioned companies, and the second is the assets of the Russian Federal Reserve. And today we've been discussing further steps in this direction. However, it is important to implement the sanctions very clearly, and of course we are completely open. We hear the positions of different countries.
The creation of a compensation fund is the third and final stage in the mechanism for transferring frozen assets to Ukraine. Discussions about its format continue in the European Union. Reported by Diana Kolesnik, Larisa Zubenko, UATV News.